You know, the struggle between good and evil, it feels like it's woven into the fabric of everything, doesn't it? It's the core of our greatest stories, our myths, our movies. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if evil isn't some powerful opposing force, but something else entirely?
And that leads to the big question, right? It's a paradox that has kept philosophers and theologians up at night for centuries. If you start from the idea of a good creation, how in the world do you explain all the suffering, the cruelty, the evil? Today, we're going to dig into a pretty radical answer to that very question.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the problem head-on. Then, we're going to flip the script with this wild idea that to exist is to be good. From there, we'll define evil as a kind of missing piece. We'll also wrestle with the very real problem of suffering. And finally, look at why this whole way of thinking has had such incredible staying power.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the ancient problem of evil. We've got to start with this fundamental paradox.
So here's the problem in a nutshell. If you believe in a creator who is all good and all-powerful, well, then you have some explaining to do. Where does all the pain and wickedness in the world come from? And this isn't just some abstract thought experiment, you know. It's a question that hits right at the heart of finding meaning in our universe.
And this is where things get really interesting. Section 2. To be is to be good. Instead of trying to solve that paradox directly, we're going to look at a totally different approach, one made famous by Thomas Aquinas. He doesn't just answer the question, he reframes the whole debate.
This quote right here, it's the whole key. Aquinas is saying something pretty mind-bending. Goodness isn't just a quality that some things have. Nope. He says it's fundamentally tied to the very fact of existing. In other words, if something is, if it exists, then on some level it's good. The two ideas are basically interchangeable.
So how does he get there? Well, it's actually a pretty clean, logical path. Step 1. He defines the good as what everything is striving for. Makes sense, right? Step 2. What does everything strive for? Its own completion, its own perfection. And step 3. What is perfection? It's just the state of fully existing, of being fully actualized. So you put all that together, and bam, you get the conclusion. To be good is simply to be. They're two sides of the very same coin.
Okay, so if everything that exists is good, where does that leave evil? That's the million-dollar question, and it brings us to Section 3, evil as a missing piece. And folks, this is the radical solution we've been building towards.
The fancy Latin term for this is privatio boni, the privation of the good. And the core idea is this. Evil doesn't actually exist on its own. It's not a substance. It's not a dark force clashing with a light one. It's a hole, a lack. It's the absence of a good that should be there.
The classic analogy, which goes way back, makes this super intuitive. Think about darkness. You can't create a bucket of darkness and pour it into a room. Darkness is not a thing. It's just what we call the absence of light. When you remove the photons, what's left is darkness. In this view, evil is just like that. It's what's left when goodness is missing.
Here's another great way to picture it. Imagine you're drawing a circle, but you stop halfway. What you have isn't an evil circle. It's just a bad circle, right? And why is it bad? Because it's incomplete. It's lacking the circularity it's supposed to have. The badness wasn't something you added to it. The badness is what's missing.
Now, this is a super important distinction, so stick with me here. The theory isn't saying that any old absence is evil. For example, a rock can't see. Is that evil? Of course not, because sight was never supposed to be part of a rock's nature. That's a mere absence. But blindness in an animal that should have sight, that is a privation. The blindness is an evil because it's the lack of a good, sight, that really ought to be there. See the difference?
Okay. I know what you're probably thinking. This all sounds very neat and philosophical, but what about the real world? This leads us straight to Section 4, and the biggest objection of all. Does this theory just trivialize the reality of suffering? And you're not alone in thinking that. The philosopher Bertrand Russell put this objection pretty bluntly. When you're in excruciating pain or you witness some horrific act of cruelty, it doesn't feel like an absence of something. It feels like a very real, very powerful presence. Calling that nothing just seems to fly in the face of our most basic human experiences.
So what's the comeback to that? Well, it's pretty nuanced. The response is, yes, of course the feeling of pain is a real positive experience. No one's denying that. But the evil of the pain isn't the sensation itself. The evil is what that sensation is pointing to, a disorder, a corruption, a lack of the proper health and harmony that should be there. The evil is the breakdown of the good, not some brand new thing.
To dig a little deeper, this framework actually splits evil into two types. First, you have what's called malum poene, or evil suffered. This is basically natural evil. Think of a lion eating a gazelle. For the gazelle, that's definitely an evil, but for the lion, it's a good. It gets to eat. It's just a consequence of how the material world is structured. But then you have malum culpae, the evil of fault. This is moral evil. This is a person's failure to choose the good. And what's wild is that in this view, when someone commits this kind of evil, they're actually damaging themselves, diminishing their own being.
All right, let's bring this all home. Section 5. Why does this idea endure? I mean, what are the actual real-world implications of looking at good and evil this way?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Evil doesn't create anything. It can't. It's totally parasitic. It can only exist by corrupting a good that's already there. A lie needs a truth to twist. Sickness needs a healthy body to break down. Hate needs love to curdle. Evil has no independent power source. It's a shadow, not a substance.
And this chart really lays it all out, side by side. On one side, you have good. It's tied to being itself, its perfection. It's what everything is aiming for. On the other side, you have evil. It's always a lack, a privation, never a positive thing in itself. And this leads to a pretty stunning conclusion at the bottom there. Absolute evil is metaphysically impossible. Think about it. For something to be purely 100% evil, it would have to have zero goodness in it, which means it would have zero being. It literally couldn't exist.
So what this really means is that if evil is just a deviation, a wrong turn from the good, then you can't even begin to understand what's bad until you first have a solid grasp on what's good. To recognize sickness, you have to first understand health. To spot a lie, you have to first know the truth. The study of evil, then, always has to begin with the study of the good.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If committing an evil act is a kind of failure, a move toward non-existence, a hollowing out of reality, then the opposite has to be true too. If evil is an absence, then what are we really doing when we choose the good? What are we creating? Maybe, just maybe, we're not just doing the right thing. Maybe we're actually participating in the very act of being itself.